Fairmount Camp family. I am here today with my good friend Tiffany Janofsky.
Hi.
And we just wanted to talk to you about the mission field. And I wanted to do this today because we here at Fairmount Camp, we consider ourselves a mission field. We are a mission field here in America. But I think it's also really important for us to think about what missions looks like in other parts of the world, because that's what Christ has told us to do, right? He tells us to go everywhere and preach the gospel. And so it's important. And we also know that lots of people are called to the mission field right here at these campgrounds.
And so I just kind of wanted to, since we knew you were in the States and I knew you're super cool and it meant that I got to hang out with you for a few minutes,
that we could talk just a little bit about the mission field, where you're at, and how it relates kind of to Fairmount Camp. So my first question for you is, how is it that you are a part of the Fairmount Camp family? So what's kind of just a little bit of your history with us?
Yeah, so I have been at Fairmount since as long as I can remember. I think my first summer here was the first summer I was alive. For a long time, my dad was the head of the chairman.
Yeah, sure.
Chairman? Okay, edit that part. For a long time, my dad was the chairman. I couldn't think of the name. And so I grew up coming to Fairmount. I was here every summer, starting from JBC. I think I was like one that got in a couple months before I should have, just based on my birthday. And so any chance that I had to be out at Fairmount and at camp, I was here. It was my second home. Loved coming out to our cabin. This is where I got saved. I went to JBC camp, and I remember it so clearly. I was 12 years old, and I remember the night that I accepted Christ as my Savior. I grew up in the church. My dad's a pastor, and so that was the year that I really came to an understanding that it was a decision I needed to make. It wasn't, I wasn't just saved because my dad was a pastor in the church and I grew up and I knew the right answers, but it was a decision that I needed to make for myself. And so I remember it so clearly coming down to the altar at camp, and just sensing his spirit, honestly, even at the age of 12. And I don't know that I had the language for it at that time, but I knew that I was being touched in a way that I had never experienced before. And Christ met with me at that place at the altar. And so over the years, camp has continued to be just a really special place where God's met me, where I'm at. Whether that was in the tabernacle at Bethel or at the altar in the dorms with other girls through JBC camp or senior high camp. Even I don't know if it's still there, the prayer cabin that was available the last couple of years that I was able to be here. And so this has been such a special place and a really significant part of my journey where God has He's provided community here through camp, not just with those that I go to church with at Brookhaven, but this has been such a communal space where He's surrounded me with others who have just poured into my life that I don't know how all influential Fairmount Camp has been in my journey, and I'm glad that I don't have to know that because it's just been so much a part of my walk with the Lord.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. And I do love the communal aspect. I think that's one of the things that we lack in our normal neighborhoods, and just people miss community. And so I think that that's really something that we can offer. So thank you for sharing that. So I want you to tell us a little bit about your mission field. And I'm gonna, a little bit of context. You know, you grow up thinking missionaries look like this, or missionaries do this when they go into the mission field. And so I'm guessing that the mission field looks different than what you expected. So just talk to us a little bit about your call. Where is it you're at? And even that has evolved. Where you're at today, is it where you thought when you were initially called?
Right.
And how it is that you just kind of have to be open to God's plan for your life and what that mission field looks like for you.
So let me try to answer all of that. If I
It's
forget
a lot.
question,
Sorry.
If I forget a question, feel free to tell me.
No problem.
So I actually am on a field that I knew very little about initially. I'm on the field serving in Albania, and I've been there the past 2.5 years. But Albania was not on my radar. I had heard a little bit. I had some friends who had served in Albania or had made trips there. But that was really in my peripheral view for a long time. It was not my focus. And so leading up to that, I was actually, I had intended to end up in South Asia. And so had made several trips to a closed country in South Asia and really sensed God leading in that direction and confirming through scripture and confirming through different trips that I had made, through other just saints in my church who were pouring into me and who actually went on some trips with me. And so sensing that affirmation in the direction towards South Asia. So I set off with excitement and confidence that was where God was going to lead me. And I made several shorter term trips. My longest one there, I spent a month. And again, just continued to sense God's leading in that direction. And so I actually applied with World Gospel Mission, was brought on and commissioned to kind of reopen the field in that closed country, and started the fundraising process, the partner development process, and speaking with different people, and got to the point where I was fully funded and ready to go. We thought we had found a way with a particular visa, and after I was fully funded, we then were told that visa was not going to be sufficient. And so that left me a little bit homeless, a little bit frazzled, because I'd already moved out of my home. All of my things were in storage. I had given most of my stuff away, and the way that God provided that, it was about a 3-month process of just waiting and trying to figure out what are some other doors we could walk through to get to this country. And the process of learning of his provision and his faithfulness when we can't see a way that it's going to happen. And also, those are months that I never want to forget. And I'm so glad that they happened, because in the midst of kind of the chaos and the emotional confusion of, God, you led me this way and now you're closing this door, I don't understand. I heard his voice in a way I hadn't heard before. And so he was so sweet to give me that time of just learning, what does his voice sound like amidst the chaos, amidst the other voices that are screaming at us sometimes, and learning that his voice is not a voice of confusion. It's not a voice of condescension or condemnation. It's gentle, and sometimes it's a whisper. But we know that we can trust his voice. And so, as difficult as those 3 months were of just having no idea what was going to happen, I don't think I would trade that process. I'm sure he would maybe reveal that in another way if those 3 months hadn't, but I'm so grateful to look back and know that was part of my journey that led me to Albania. And so, the mission field does not look at all what I was expecting. I relinquished my desire to be in the country that I thought he wanted me in, and realized I was keeping my foot in the door longer than was necessary. And so when I pulled my foot out of that door and let it close in his timing and in his grace, he opened up this way to Albania. And so my director had brought up in Albania sometime near mid-July, and I knew in that first conversation, once she brought up Albania, that was where I was going. And so 2 weeks later, I flew out, sight unseen, to Albania, and it's been a bit of a whirlwind. I had no idea what I was going to be doing there, but I was so well received into an established team there. And so, the first year was just kind of plug and play. You're just trying to get your feet wet and trying to learn the language and the culture, and it was all brand new to me, and there's rich history in Albania. So the first year was definitely just so much learning and absorbing everything that you could to try and understand those that you were going to be working with and living with rubbing shoulders with. And so I had the great opportunity to get involved in both village and urban ministry, which look very, very different. Albania is a really interesting place. The capital city, Tirana, feels very modern upon first observation. There's a lot of layers there, but it has a lot of Western influence, so there's a lot of familiar things there. And then you go to the village, and it feels a bit more second or third world country. And so poverty levels are it's a pretty impoverished nation, but it is drastically different from the city to the village. And so, you know, I am part of a coffee shop church plant in the capital city, and so that's really exciting. We have a very missional community that we are, that mindset, that's what we're there doing. Fellowship and evangelism don't just happen in the church, it happens in life.
Absolutely.
And so our approaches and the way we do life looks a little bit different than how we approach ministry in the village. And so, you know, I'll go from a pretty established and modern area to later in the week we are in an abandoned house that doesn't have electricity, it doesn't have running water, the windows are broken and shattered, and that's where we do our kids ministry. We rent that house for really, really cheap. And so we have anywhere from 15 to 40 kids show up on any given week, and we cram all inside, and in the winters we take a space heater, we take a generator, make sure everything's charged up before we go, and kids come in not weather appropriate clothing and come with, you know, dirt and grime on their face because they've been playing in the road, playing soccer just before coming, and it almost feels a little bit night and day of what ministry looks like. And so that's certainly been a learning experience of you have to adapt. You have to adapt to the situation. And then my main ministry is with an organization called VT Albania. That's now a ministry under World Gospel Mission. And so we are a school providing education, physical therapy, and special events for young adults with disabilities. And so I've just actually stepped into the director role of that foundation within WGM. And yeah, so those with disabilities in Albania, Albania is not disability friendly society. And so we have about 10 students who come, and we provide education and tutoring, physical therapy, an outlet for them to come out of isolation. A lot of times just due to inaccessibility for buildings and negative social stigma, a lot of individuals with any sort of disability are stuck at home in isolation because society is uncomfortable seeing them. So what we're doing is providing a space that's safe for them, where they're cherished, where their value and their worth is communicated. And hopefully part of what we're doing is communicating the gospel, that Jesus loves them, that they were created in God's image on purpose and for a purpose, and that God loves them. And we've seen incredible things. Just some of our students' transformation stories have been incredible.
That's beautiful, Tiffany, because if you even think about, you know, our own spaces, we get so easily inconvenienced by, well, this program doesn't look like we think it's supposed to look, or, you know, I'm not sure that historically we're that much better with people with disabilities, you know, because many of our churches, we don't have programs, you know, built for those. And so I think that there's a lot that we can learn from what you're doing. And I think it's really important just thinking about, you know, that you're willing to have this children's ministry in an abandoned house with broken windows. Can you imagine? I mean, we would think about that and there's no way that we would do that. But there's just, you know, the gospel, these kids deserve the gospel.
Absolutely.
We have so many kids in our own communities that deserve the gospel in this same way. So I think we have a lot to learn. Are we willing to go to the abandoned buildings? Are we willing? Because statistics are not in favor of showing that people aren't coming to church.
Right.
I mean, especially
Right.
looking what our society has been going through this pandemic. You know, people are not going to church. So what are we doing? We have to be willing
Right.
to go outside of our comfort zone. And if God is calling us to go to an abandoned building, then take the generator and go.
I love that you spoke into deserving. These kids are deserving to know Christ because just to speak into a little context with that, we've been meeting in this village for about 3 years, and this village is one of the few villages in Albania that doesn't have a mosque. Islam is one of the predominant religions, not practiced, but in name. It's one of the top religions in Albania. And this village, an imam came and said that this village wasn't deserving of a mosque. And so they've been deemed unworthy to have access to God. And so with permission, talking to the mayor, our team has been in the village for several years now. It's been really hard. It's had its own significant challenges, but everyone's deserving. Everyone should have the opportunity to know Him. And sometimes that comes at our own inconvenience.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, and even to go back to ADA, the rights of the disabled are relatively new, even in America. And so that's what we get to do. We get to shed light on, we have rights, we have purpose, we have value, and that happens when we're in proximity with people, even costing us our own conveniences. Yeah.
If you're not around people with the disability, or if you're not around people that live life different, how in the world can your heart be broken?
Right.
You know, we're called. My heart needs to be broken for the people that don't know Christ, that are living in poverty, that are living with less, and that are just living in this broken society. And how can my heart be broken for them if I keep them in the sin? You know,
As transformational as we pray and trust the work is that we are partnering with God in, it should be just as transformational in our life as well. And that's maybe been an unexpected thing going to the field, is not realizing how much I was going to change and grow and be pushed out of my comfort zone and my box of how I related to God and how I saw God. And there's just been so many things that have been challenged in my life, and it should be that process of transformation in yourself as well.
Absolutely. And you know what? Quite frankly, we're going to be asked one day, how did you use your time?
Yeah.
How did you use your time? Did
We're
you use your
stewards.
time? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Did you help build the kingdom, or were you about your own conveniences? You know, and so I want to be able to say to God, you know, this is what I did, and so good for you. Good for you for taking a step of courage, because I cannot imagine how hard that was. You know, I can't even imagine the faith that it took to step out and go into a country that you knew, you know, so little about, that you left all of the modern conveniences that you were used to, and you were like, okay, God, I'm gonna do this. I'm scared because I think it's okay to be afraid.
Absolutely.
I think it's okay to say to
Absolutely.
God, I don't know what I'm doing here, because that's when our faith grows. You've already said, you know, that your faith, it transformed
Right.
who you were because you stepped out in faith. And so he calls people every day that we don't run into this thinking, I got this.
Right.
You know, we go into this thinking, God, I don't know what you were thinking about calling me. I am weak. I'm broken myself. You know, how in the world can I do this? But he's like, you know what? I designed you for this. And so it's big. It's big. So thank you for being willing to accept that call and for stepping out. And so I
told you she was cool, didn't I? Yeah. So I've really enjoyed this. We have gone so far over 4
I'm
minutes.
so sorry. Well, that's
But
really your own
I-
fault
it
because you
is.
set me up for failure.
I'm so
basically.
sorry
I
about
can't-
that.
I
I
can't
know.
keep it.
Me either. And I'm
No.
just like, I want to hear all about this. So here's my last question for you. Maybe I make no promises. So when do you get to go back to the mission field? I assume that you've been home doing fundraising.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah, so I've been back since mid-December, and the goal is that I am able to get back by, I have a ticket for May 31st.
Okay.
And so that's the goal and hope. Part of that is kind of intertwined with my residency that I have there. So if I can only be out for 6 months, and then I've got to do more paperwork and more dollar signs. So the goal is to get back there before May 31st. And we're trusting that God's going to provide. It's been incredible to see just the way He's brought people alongside. And yeah, this is a really exciting thing that we get to be a part of. And so being able to share that with people and the opportunity for them to be a part of transformational stories is so exciting. Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to hear more about your story, or they wanted to support you or ask more questions, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, the best way would be email me, text me, Facebook message me, send a comment to or a message to you guys, and you guys could connect us. That would be totally fine. I'm speaking for you now.
No. I was actually going to suggest
Yeah.
that, you know,
Yeah.
if you do have questions about that, we'll either provide it with this post, you know, that we'll do, or we'll feel free, you know, to call us.
Yeah, I'd love to meet with people and just share. I mean, I know we went way over time, but there's still so much more to talk about and stories just to share. And so would love to meet with people, however that may look in COVID times. Yeah.
So obviously we're praying about God's timing to get you back, you know, by the end of May. Are there other specifics that we should be praying about as part of your community, you know, as part of your support system? What are some of the specific things that we should be praying for?
Yeah, well, we are still kind of, it's been hard with COVID, having this transition. I went from a once a week, 45-minute volunteer at VT to the director. And that has been just God's grace has allowed that to happen. It has been challenging as well. And so, I would just greatly benefit from any prayer that I can get for just leading well and leading with discernment. It's a challenge leading in a foreign country, and haven't had the luxury, as people have been kind of locked in their own countries, haven't had the luxury of some trainings that I was hoping for. So just prayer for clarity and discernment and future decisions for our organization, and just overall that our students would come to know Christ who loves them, and that we would be open to communicating that however it may be presented, that we're ready and we're there to share with them who loves them and that they have value and worth, and we love them.
So thank you, Fairmount Camp family. Sorry it was longer. I'm really not sorry at all. But thank you for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.